Hello. Hello. Let me just set up and then we'll get started. Let me know if you can hear me and see me okay in the chat. Sound is good, okay. Is there any lag at all? Because my internet's really bad. Video is choppy. That's okay. Alright, as long as you can hear me, that's good. I'm going to have my notes up next to the chat, so I should be able to see what you guys say. So that'll be good. Okay. Well, I don't have to worry about what I look like then if the video is all messy. That's good. Okay, so my talk is going to be on marriage and anarchy, sort of the agorist view of marriage. A little bit about me. My name is Stacy Litz. I'm a student at Drexel University. I'm a political science major. I chose my major before I really got into all this stuff, so you could say it was a little bit of a mistake, but at least now I'm learning about the enemy, so that's always good. I work as a social media analyst for the Center for a Stateless Society. I'm the Dean of Marketing for Individual Sovereign University. I help out with Students for Liberty a lot as a campus coordinator, and amongst other things, I guess I was the president of Student Liberty Front at Drexel. Now I'm the secretary. I've been in like every position in that club, so I do a lot in this movement. But what made me choose this topic was about a year ago. I started doing wedding ceremonies. I got certified online as a wedding officiant through the Universal Life Church for a friend. She wanted someone to do her wedding who she knew. She didn't want to pay a really high price for a minister or anything like that. So I got certified and ordained, I guess you call it. So I did her wedding, and after that, I decided, okay, maybe I can make this into a little business. So I started up Liberty Weddings, which at first was just me, just doing wedding ceremonies. Sorry, that was the laundry. Doing wedding ceremonies affordably for people, and while doing them, I would sign their licenses to make it legal and all that, but at the same time I would try educating them on the ideas of liberty and how, to get government out of marriage, how love might be the real thing to symbolize a marriage and not the government. And throughout this process, I guess, people haven't been really into it too much. Like, people, I've noticed they get married sometimes spur of the moment just because of insurance or health care reasons. And I try explaining to them how that shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't be forced to marry because of this, but it's really hard to educate people about this. I've had some trouble with that, but hopefully we've got a website up for Liberty Weddings, and hopefully people will read it before they choose me as their officiant and, learn a little bit about this process and why I do it. But another reason why I think this is really important to talk about is because um, almost every person in this world, at least in the United States, probably is trying to, get hitched in some way, get married, get in a relationship. It's just normal life process. So it's really in the back of everyone's mind, like, am I going to get married one day? I'm dating someone. Am I going to get engaged? What does that mean? Um, so everyone gets married or might want to in some way. It might happen. So this is really a part of everyone's life. It's all around them, and it's not always talked about too much. How to avoid the state while getting married if it's possible, and all that. So thought it was a really important topic. And also, both the marriage and divorce rate have gone up incredibly in, I guess, a little after the 60s. Like, it's been just skyrocketing since then. And all of this, is it because of licensing? Is it because of the coercion that the government uses with insurance and health and inheritance and all that? Is that what's causing this spurt in growth? Um, so yeah, that's a really important thing to think about. Um, and also, you see in the news all the political battles with marriage, with the LGBT groups, with churches fighting for marriage to be the way they want it, when really that wasn't the case in history. But we'll get into that. So with that, it's just really an important topic to talk about. And some questions to think about throughout this talk. What is marriage? What does that mean? Do I need a license or a contract to be married to someone? Um, is that really what I want to do with my life? Do I want to get into this marriage with a license that involves the state? Or are there alternatives to that? So just think about that throughout this talk. And I think, yeah, I have a couple of trivia questions in here, so in the chat when I ask, if you guys can try to answer, that would be cool to make it interactive. And also save your questions for the end, and we'll go through those then, because I don't think my talk is too long. Okay, so first, I guess the history of marriage. Of course, there are tons of cultures and societies and all that, so there's tons of different marriages that have happened throughout the world. But to mention the Bible, it's been mentioned in there that shepherds and wives would get married without any justice of peace, without any government. They would just make a mutual commitment to each other to be in a monogamous, loving relationship, and it would just be understood to those around them, hey, these two are a couple, maybe they're having a baby, like they're married in some way, and being devout to each other symbolized that marriage. Um, and with this is a kind of good way to think about marriage and anarchy. If you see a couple together and you respect each person in that group, you might not try to, get involved with one of the members because you can tell they're in some kind of monogamous relationship. And you don't need any government documents to symbolize the marriage. And this would also, take into account gay marriage and marriage equality because, there is no formal way of saying these two are together. There's no government thing, so that always that was a good thing to think about when people also say traditional marriage. If they're thinking, Brad Spangler actually put this up on his Facebook the other day. He's like, "What the heck is traditional marriage? Like, what does that mean? Like, back when women were slaves to their husbands and stuff." But actually, in this context of the Bible, traditional marriage, if you're like a Christian, was just, there was no government, there was no force used with contracts. It just, happened. So that's a good thing to think about. What is traditional marriage? What does that mean? There are so many different types of marriage too. That whole phrase is just ridiculous. But like marriage can have to do with like social circumstances, economical, spiritual, religious circumstances. So, and like where you're from and all that, cultures of the area. So traditional marriage is just, what does that mean? But anyway, let's get back on track. So marriage was not always about love too in history, which you might think of again with the traditional marriage thing, like what does that mean? In the Middle Ages, it was considered sort of a mockery to actually love your spouse. It was very political, your marriage, also between families too, between contracts with them, usually to benefit the families as a whole. It wasn't about, Mary and Joe are in love with each other, now they're going to get married. It was very political. Um, Also, during the Roman Empire, loving couples were forced to divorce if their families changed political positions. So again, very political. That's sort of not what I think modern marriage is about at all. It's usually about loving one another, which is really good, I would say. But okay, so we have our first trivia question actually, because we're going to talk about the history of marriage laws in America. So during the mid-1800s, marriage laws were created by the government. Now, why do you think they were created by the government in the mid-1800s? Please answer in the chat and we'll see if any of you know, and I can give you a hint if you guys don't know. Of course, my internet will probably lag, but we'll see. I am getting no responses yet. Oh, here it goes. Wow, my internet is really bad. Okay, give me 1 second. Alright, I did not get any responses, I don't think, because my internet's not working well. But I'll just answer it. Similar to the drug war, where there were bans on, for instance, marijuana because of racial reasons. It was the same in America, and America started laws against interracial marriages, and licenses were required by the state to prevent this from happening. Woohoo, big surprise. And actually, Black's Law Dictionary, it actually defines the marriage license as a license or permission granted by a public authority to persons who intend to intermarry. So, intermarry is defined as mixed or interracial marriages. So, yeah, that's just wonderful. That's the reason why licenses were required. But then later on, by 1923, the federal government established the Uniform Marriage and Marriage License Act, and then by 1929, every state had adopted marriage laws. So, yeah, that's the main reason why licenses were required, because of racial reasons. But eventually, you know, things changed and more things started to apply to these licenses, which we'll get into when I get into talking about the licensing process and all that. So another thing, though, in the history of marriage and all that, actually the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has a little article on marriage, which is interesting because this is a global thing. It's a universal human rights document. So it says that men and women of full age, without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion, have the right to marry and to found a family. Blah, blah, blah. They're all entitled equal rights. Marriage shall be entered only with the consent of intending spouses. But, okay, so the thing about that is that it mentions, you know, men and women of full age. What does that mean? I guess it protects that you can marry someone regardless of skin color, but there are lots of vague words in that statement, and the whole gender thing, yeah, that's putting marriage, it takes away a lot of like cultural things too. Of course, gay marriage is completely not included in that statement, so I think that's really ridiculous. So okay, that's some history for you. Of course, there's lots more. Of course, you can really get into, you know, how women were sort of in servitude in their marriages and all that, but we can move on. Oh, actually, in the chat, Nick Ford mentions Emma Goldman's essay on marriage, which I'm going to post at the end under reading material I have. So, or someone maybe else can post it, but okay. So now I want to talk about the process of getting married by the state, in case you don't know, and all that, because I deal with this like every day with my job, doing the wedding ceremonies. And people, of course, like every government thing, there's long lines, there's waiting, it's a bunch of crap, it costs money. So I will explain this and we'll see what you think about it. Okay, so in order to get married, you decide, I want to get married. Oh, okay. I have to go to the orphans court. Now, I don't know if I've never heard of the orphans court before I started doing this. So you have to find where your orphans court is. I don't know why it's called orphans court, actually. It's a little weird. But yeah. So you go to this court. You might have to wait in a line with other couples. You have to have full documentation that you are a legal citizen, so maybe a license, a passport, green card, something like that. So you both have to go in together with this information. You have to pay a fee, which could be up to, I've seen $75 as the highest so far to get the license. Um, so you go in, you sign, you give them the money. A lot of courts require that you put your hand on a Bible to get married, and I've dealt with people who are pagan, who are just atheists, who don't care, and they were really a little upset by that because they don't know why they have to involve a Bible and a church and all that into their wedding, which makes sense because, why would you want to do that if you don't believe in Christianity? And what about the separation of church and state? I don't know where that went. So when I found out about this, I was actually infuriated, and I probably scared the people I was working with because I just didn't understand that, because they were pagan and they had to swear upon a Bible about their marriage. So, very strange. Um, so yeah, they also require that you bring in any paperwork about your divorce that you might have had, or any other marriage information from the past, and all that. And there's usually an age that matters. I think it's usually 18 that you can get married, and then some states, if you're 16, you can bring a parent in for permission to get married, and that's fine. And usually if you get, for instance, married, well, pretty much if you get married in any way, you need two witnesses to watch your marriage, um, which I guess is just something to make it maybe more difficult, or maybe to make sure that you really want to get married. You have to get a couple of friends to come with you to watch you get married, so that makes it legit for some reason. Um, and actually, some states mention in their licensing information, such as Ohio, that we'll get into this more, that the state of Ohio, in this instance, is like the third party in your marriage. So let me read this. This is from their laws on marriage. It says, when you repeat your marriage vows, you enter into a legal contract. There are three parties to that legal contract. 1, you, 2, your spouse, and 3, the state of Ohio. The state is a party to the contract because under its laws you have certain obligations and responsibilities to each other, to any children you may have, and to Ohio. So with that, I guess the state of Ohio enforces the responsibilities you have to your children, and it forces you to obligate yourself to Ohio, the state, which is a thing, I guess, that you can do that to, sort of like a religion, I guess. But yeah, so marriage, yeah, getting married through the state can be a little difficult, and it's cumbersome, and oftentimes it might even dissuade couples from getting married because they don't want to go through all that. The aftermath of getting married after you sign your license, it's pretty scary if you're, um, a woman who wants to then change her last name after you send in the license as the officiant, which I do. Within about a month tops, you get the documentation that says, all about what you get for being married, any tax breaks, any information on, the changing of your last name. They send you a nice list, all the things you have to change to get your last name fixed, and of course you have to pay more money because you have to get your driver's license changed and any other government documentation, banks and all that. So it can be costly and cumbersome and annoying to go through a government licensed marriage. And let's see what I have next. Okay. Alright, so I have, let me see if this is what I want to talk about. Alright, so, marriage rights, and obligations can, be different depending on where you're from, but some general, stuff that happens when you get married, includes, I'll just give you a list, giving a husband, or wife, um, family control over sexual services, labor, and property. Maybe this should have been included in history, but I'll list it anyway. Giving a husband or wife responsibility for the spouse's debts. Giving a husband or wife visitation rights when his or her spouse is incarcerated or hospitalized. Giving a husband or wife control over his or her spouse's affairs when the spouse is incapacitated. Establishing the second legal guardian of a parent's child, establishing a joint fund of property for the benefit of children, and establishing a relationship between the families of the spouses. So these things vary depending on your society and all that, but where you're from. But those are just some things that marriage usually symbolize, with or without government. So yeah. All right. So let me think. So before we go into some of the reasons why you shouldn't get a government marriage, I have trivia number 2 question, and the chat seems to be working faster now, so hopefully I'll get your answers better. So once you get a marriage license, what are some of the ways that that benefits you as a married couple? So what are the ways that getting a marriage license benefits you? Why would you want to get a government license, basically? How does the state coerce you into getting a government license? Alright, we will give it a couple minutes to load. I will get some coffee. I think they're watching this. That's why the internet's so slow. They. Alright. We'll give it one more second. Alright, it's not loading, so I will just answer the question. Maybe you guys answered it, but I can't see that. Okay, so what do licenses do? Why do you want to get a license through the government? Okay, so first off, there are medical benefits and rights, which I mentioned a little bit. There is insurance issues that, wait, I'm just getting something in the chat. Slowly, it's coming. Never mind. Okay, so yeah, with insurance, when you get married, you can usually go on your partner's insurance. If they have a job that has insurance, you can jump on that too, which is really nice, I guess. Also, there are sometimes some circumstances where if you lose your job, you can get on your partner's insurance if you're unemployed. There's a lot of red tape and lots of different information about that, but mainly, yeah, just medical benefits and rights. Also, if your partner is in an emergency in the hospital. This is something that really infuriates me about gay marriage, that if you are in a relationship with someone and you can't get married at all, um, you can't get married, because of government licensing in your state, you can't go into the hospital to see your partner if, he's dying or she's dying. That's absolutely ridiculous. It makes me really mad. So, if you're married, though, you can do that. You can go in to see your partner in the hospital, and yeah, that's great. And also health updates. I guess it's the same as being in the hospital. Like if you aren't married, you can't just go up to the front desk and be like, "Oh, how's Joe doing?" Because they won't answer you unless you're married. Fun, fun. Okay. Number two, property. Um, so when you get married, um, the license is a contract. So in case you do break up and get a divorce, make sure that the property gets divided up between you two. Everyone gets an equal share. And if you're not married and you break up your relationship and there's issues with property, you have to hire a lawyer and, go through that, maybe sue, which I guess is less civil than, getting a divorce and doing all that, which I think divorces can be just as messy as getting a lawyer because, there's always disputes that go crazy. So really, I don't see the license as being too much of a way to protect that. If people hate each other and they get a divorce, it's going to be messy no matter what. And lastly, I have here, I see some stuff is coming up in the chat now for me. So there's some stuff out there too. But inheritance, which is also, I think that actually next to the interracial reasoning for marriage licenses being created, inheritance was a big one. So it's basically, in case one of the people in the marriage dies, where that property goes, like if they both die, does it go to the children? And since children are included in licensing as being part of this contract, then they might get the inheritance and all that. So there we go. That's why you might be coerced into getting a license. Medical benefits and rights, property issues, and inheritance. Okay, so I have on my list of things to talk about. Let me load it up real quick. There's this really great list, 5 reasons why Christians should not obtain a state marriage license, which I will post in the chat, hopefully. Alright, I'm going to do that, and then we'll talk about it. Alright, so, 5 reasons why Christians should not obtain a state marriage license. I love this list. It's really well thought out. First off, number 1, the definition of a license demands that we not obtain one to marry. So, let's see. So basically, this guy is asking, why should it be illegal to marry without the state's permission? And more importantly, why should we need the state's permission to participate in something which God instituted? And then he cites a biblical passage. Remember, this is reasons why Christians shouldn't get a state marriage license, which is actually a tough argument to make when most Christians that get involved politically are forcing, their beliefs and their traditional marriage down everyone's throats. So I really like this a lot. He says we should not seek the state's permission to marry and should not grovel before state officials to seek it. What happens if the state says no? By giving the state the authority to grant you a license implies that it has the power to prohibit you from marrying if it chooses to. So that's something to think about. And he says it's a God-given right to marry. Why should the state have power to say yes or no over it? That's number 1. Number 2 is when you marry with a marriage license, you grant the state jurisdiction over your marriage. So basically, your marriage is a creature of the state. So basically, they have jurisdiction over your entire marriage, including the fruit of your marriage, which could be any profits you make as a couple, and especially your children and any property you might own. I guess children are almost considered property. So yeah, so you're giving the state power to basically own your lives and the fruits of your labor and marriage and love and all that. Okay, so number 3 in this list. When you marry with a marriage license, you place yourself under a body of law which is immoral. Okay, so that's a pretty good one, because if you're in this conference, you probably think the state is immoral. So yeah, by getting a marriage license from the state, you're letting an immoral thing be a part of your marriage, which is not good, because the money that are paying for, you're paying your license and all that money, where is it going? We can get into all that. It's going to this immoral religious entity type thing, whatever government is, and you probably don't want that to happen. So you don't want any of your money to go into that. So why get a state license? Okay, and let's see. Number 4, the marriage license invades and removes God-given parental authority. Alright, so this is, this guy mentions a biblical reading about that. When you read the Bible, you see God intended for children to have their father's blessing regarding whom they married. Daughters were to be given in marriage by their fathers. Okay, so you can take this drastically and say, that women have to, you have to get permission to be married, and it's sort of like slavery. But I think what he means is that, it should be a more family decision, or a part of your society. Like, your friends' family should help you decide if you're going to get married, not necessarily the government. You shouldn't seek permission from the government. More, through voluntary, I guess, questioning from parents and all that. Okay, and number 5, I love this one. This is the one I mentioned before. When you marry with a marriage license, you are like a polygamist. From the state's point of view, when you marry with a marriage license, you are not just marrying your spouse, but you are also marrying the state. Not that there's anything wrong with polygamy, I suppose, unless I don't know, polygamy is another story, but the point is, when you get married and you love someone, you probably just want to marry them, and not the government. You don't want to marry the government. You don't want to marry the state of Ohio. So that is something really important to think about, especially if you're getting if you want to get married religiously and you want God to be a part of your marriage, part of your relationship. You might want God to be watching over you, or even be a part of your marriage, but you don't want the state in there. I don't think anyone really, is thinking when they're talking about engagement, oh, I can't wait for Ohio to be my other partner. Oh, that doesn't happen. So what's the point of that? So yeah, that's that. Those are those 5 points. I really like them. Let's see. Let me get back to the chat here. Give me a second. Give me one more second. Alright. Next link I'm going to post in the chat is something that looks like a George Donnelly blog website. I don't know, maybe he made it, because it looks like something he would make, but I found this today when looking for something to read off of, to cheat off of. So let me load it up, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so this website, it's called Government Free Marriage. Not pro, not anti, just get out of marriage. Okay, so I really like this website. But it's not really well developed too much, but it does have some good points, I believe, in the About section on basically the way that a lot of agorists, anarchists feel about marriage, getting government out of marriage as much as possible. I'm hoping it's, oh, I already had it open. Okay, never mind. I got it. Alright, so I'm in the About Us section of that website. So basically it's all about getting government out of marriage. Let's see. It mentions, that the state wasn't involved with marriage in the past. It's sort of a recent development, and all that. So the main points are that marriage, like any other contract, is the act of consent that derives from the individual, self-evident natural right to enter and form voluntary agreements. Okay, so basically, yeah, you're entering a voluntary association with one another, and you don't need the government to be involved with that. You don't need its protection either, and that goes with a lot of other libertarian ideas on contracts that, if worse comes to worse, you could seek third-party arbitration for any disputes that might come about, but otherwise, you don't need government to be there. Point number 2, they have, government has no legitimate moral or practical basis for interfering in the private agreement of marriage as an imposed third party, either to prevent it based on a definition or to grant permission through licensing. Okay. Private religious institutions should fully be free to define marriage based on their unique moral and theological priorities. That makes sense. I was reading today, actually, I saw this debate online, and people were so, I guess they thought that government came first for licensing and marriage and all that. And they're like, just get religion out of marriage. Just get it out completely. This is a total government thing. Just let governments give the licenses and no religion should be involved at all. And I was like, okay, that's weird, because I think in history, you see oftentimes religion is included because people were, I think, more religious in the past. There were definitely less atheists, so everyone wanted to get, their religion involved, not government. So making everything a government thing is ridiculous. I think this is not a government thing at all. Okay. Employers and other private institutions should be fully free to allocate benefits to employees or customers as they choose based on contract with those employees or customers. That's a really good one. So basically, if they want to, if an employer or private institution wants to give incentives to married couples, let them do that. If they don't, let them do that. There should be no force involved with choosing, what determines your benefits by the state from, private entities. Because that's just another way that government can get involved with private businesses. Like, think about, once businesses get big and say you start a business and you start making profit, and then the government comes around somehow and says, you have to start giving out health care and you have to give it to only married couples, but you might not have a lot of married couples, and you're like, okay, that's stupid. Something like that. It's just another way government can get its nose in things where it doesn't belong. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Many private employers already allocate benefits voluntarily to domestic partners without government requirement to do so, and without such partnerships yet being defined by the state agencies as marriage. Alright, that's pretty much what I just said. Alright, number 6 in this is laws defining marriage to strict parameters and definitions have the impact of granting courts determinative power in the issue, and when overturned, establish a basis for involvement to impose a defining view of marriage contrary to the will of the legislative enactment. Let me read that again. Okay, so basically, yeah, when laws define marriage very strictly and give courts the power, it basically gives all the determining power to courts, I guess, and yeah. And it says that will push for a traditional view of marriage to be defined when marriage does not have to be in some like distinct role defined by the state. There are many different kinds of marriages. There's not just one. Why force it to be just like one thing? Okay, so let me go back to my notes. That website's really good. There's some articles listed. Um, but yeah, I wish that this website could be better developed and maybe in the future become an outlet for all of us, because yeah, marriage is part of everyone's life. It's really important to get involved with that, and make your decision up like what you're going to do when the time comes when you might want to get married. Okay, so let me get back to the chat. And let me get my notes up again. I'm a little bit of a mess. I just got back from Florida doing volunteer work for a week. Didn't get much sleep, and yeah, so bear with me here. I actually went on that trip with the president and vice president, though, of the Drexel Democrats, so we had a lot to talk about. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, talking to them about that. Alright, so next on my list of things to talk about, I guess we can go into the same-sex marriage issue real quick, just how licensing, as we all know, has created a lot of problems with that, creating inequalities amongst people for who they love is ridiculous. It forces these people too, if they are uneducated on liberty and the possibilities of getting a state-free marriage, which we'll get into too. They end up getting involved in the political system, and they often, choose to, they pick sides that might not represent, their beliefs. They might think that Democrats are liberal, jump on that bandwagon, and then, it takes them a very long time to realize that, the Democrats aren't even doing anything to help them and help their cause. So it's just ridiculous. I've taken classes at Drexel on, the Constitution and stuff, and for one class we had to create arguments using the Constitution for and against gay marriage, and it can be done both ways. It's possible. So why rely on something that's so wishy-washy for your whole life, like your benefits, like your seeing your spouse in the hospital and all that? That just really gets to be, and your children you might have. Um, if it's just so silly. So with same-sex marriage, I guess I'm actually almost running out of time. Wow. Yeah, just try to educate people who you might know who are thinking of same-sex marriage, the LGBT people. Try to educate them on the ideas of liberty, and that might be a way out. I just started trying to get involved in the Philadelphia community, trying to, maybe perform ceremonies that are state-free, because it's for their own, mental benefit, because in Pennsylvania they can't get married, and it's just like if you're in love with someone and you want to have that celebration and ceremony, why shouldn't you be able to do it? Also, I guess separation of church and state just doesn't exist in this case, because if I have a religion that supports gay marriage, why is it not recognized by the government? Why? I don't get it. So, yeah, just a lot of education needs to be done in that community, I think. Teach them about liberty and this kind of stuff. And one last thing I have written on that is, I always hear the argument, if gay marriage is legal, should polygamy also be legal? Well, probably. Of course. It should be legal as long as it's between consenting adults, and I don't even like using the term legal anyway, because it implies that government can make something legal or illegal. So yes, it should be allowed, and if there were issues that came up from it, any disputes, again, third-party arbitration, something would come up. Nothing should be illegal. The end. Okay, so I'm going to go through some alternatives then to licensing, and while I'm doing that, if you have any questions, please post them, because it's going to take me probably like 5-10 minutes to see your questions. So, yeah. And I've got to hop on. I have another presentation then in 15 minutes, I guess. So we'll go through this quick, because you probably already know the alternatives, being smart agorists. Okay, so I have written here, don't get a government license. Duh, winning. Charlie Sheen, I had to mention him. Yeah, don't get a license, and then, that's how you get out of all that. If you want a celebration of your love with your partner, you can certainly have a ceremony and a huge reception with lots of drinks and all that. You don't need that license to do that. Duh, obvious. Have a fun time. Um, there's Pork Fest coming up in June, and we do marriages there. If you're interested, talk to me. Because, yeah, that's a place where you can go, celebrate your love. Everyone will get it. Everyone will understand what you're doing, and why. And, yeah, you don't need that. But I also have listed under alternatives that, sadly, oh, I have in the chat, tell us about your Pork Fest ceremonies. Okay, kind of just did a little, but yeah. So we're going to be doing, me and Sovereign Star are going to be doing ceremonies at Pork Fest. We did, okay, we did a couple of fun ones for like day ceremonies, so people were married for a day technically. Um, but we had some real ceremonies done with about 3 couples, I think, last year, and we were under a little tent, and we had cake and drinks, and it was a lot of fun, lots of pictures. So we mentioned in our ceremonies, that we are gathered here today without the presence of the state and all that. It was really awesome. So if you are thinking of anything, a commitment ceremony, you don't have to call it a marriage. You can do that at Pork Fest, and that would be really awesome. So yeah, that's the Pork Fest ceremonies. But okay, back to the alternatives. A lot of us are sort of forced, I guess, in a way. I mean, it depends on how hardcore you are with agorism, how much you want to be off the grid, away from, if you have switched jobs because your job is in bed with the government, that's great, but some people are not in that situation to get out of their job because they need to, survive, and they might kind of, be forced into getting a marriage license because of insurance or something. Try your hardest not to get that government license if it's not necessary. But if it comes down to, you living and getting, to the doctor and all that, certainly you can get the license. I mean, it's just not the best thing to do, but it is sad that that happens, and that the coercion exists, but it exists a lot with government, and it depends on how much you get into agorist practices, how much you can avoid them, but it certainly happens. Um, okay. And also, if you are in a situation where you don't get that marriage license after so many years, the government does recognize you as married through domestic partnership. So if you're living together, so if they find out about that, and then you can get your insurance that way. But yeah, try to stay away from those licenses because you do pay in to the government and all that. Basically, yeah, and you do have to develop sort of a higher mindset, which a lot of us agorists have, the idea that, I am above the state. The state doesn't exist. If I'm married, I'm married. I don't need the government to give me a piece of paper. You can get a piece of paper anywhere. You can print off a pretty little plaque that says, I am married to so-and-so, if you really need it. But, if you have the ceremony, if you have whatever is in your, values and your culture, you don't need the state. So you just have to, raise your enlightenment, I don't need the state to do this, all that. Yeah. So, and lastly, then I'll see if you have any questions. Um, Polyamory is something that a lot of anarchists I know are looking into. I've been looking into it a bit, you could say. It's the practice, desire, or acceptance of having more than one intimate relationship at a time with the knowledge and consent of everyone involved. So basically, you can be really free in your relationships to do well, you can't really do what you please because everyone has to be involved, everyone consenting. So if you want to have more than one partner, it's possible as long as it's under the consent of everyone. And this allows you to, because I asked in the beginning questions to think about, like, do you want to get married at all to begin with? And you might not want to, because you might not want to have someone else imply ownership over you as a person. A lot of us are really into freedom, so you might not want to, worry all the time that your partner sort of like owns a part of you through a contract. Um, that could make a lot of people worried. A lot of, hardcore individuals out there that don't want that. So polyamory is something, it's basically like open relationships. That's what that is. So that is an option out there for anarchists and agorists. Okay, so that is all I have in my notes. I will look in the chat in a few more minutes. Any questions? The moral of the story is government marriage is dumb. Yes. I guess in my next talk I'm going to be talking about ways to use the government against itself, um, which is sort of what I call it, because I don't want to get all caught up with how government can make me really unhappy with its existence, its institutions, and all that. So that's why I started Liberty Weddings, which I didn't really talk about too much, but it's kind of like an umbrella group of lots of college students that want to get more involved with, maybe their interests, their hobbies. So I have my one friend makes cupcakes, so she's now making cupcakes for weddings. And my other friends are into photography, so I'm like, do you want to be a part of this? So now I have a business going, and it's really awesome getting people involved in this business of licensing and marriages and all that. And when you're not thinking about, the big picture that people might be getting married, unfairly or being forced to, it is very profitable to get involved with that. And really, like, for what I do, anyone can get ordained online. Anyone can perform ceremonies. If you don't want to do the licensing through the government, you can certainly get involved with, having wedding ceremonies without the state, mentioned. Just, doing that, having ceremonies for people who already got married through the state or need it, just like to, you know, just to have a little like ritualistic thing, like ceremony that, the state is not involved with you mentally. You are above that. Your love is more important. So there's lots of things you can do to change this and all that. So chat is going slow. You know what it is? I'm using Internet Explorer for the video over here because I thought it would be reliable. Don't ask me why. I've got like 7 toolbars. It's probably slowing things down enough. So I'm not getting anything in the chat. But yeah. Nope, it's loading something. I've got a couple of minutes, so hopefully it's something good. Let's see. Aha. Chat. This isn't the same chat. Oh, I wish it would load. I'm sad. Okay, since I'm not getting anything that I can read off of here, I will sign off now. Thank you for watching. If you, well, thank you to George Donnelly too for, making this awesome conference happen. It's really awesome. That's a great word to use. Awesome. Oh my God. Like when I was watching people all day, and yesterday I got home, so I could only watch half of the day, but oh my God. This is great. This has to happen a lot. So thank you for this opportunity, and any donations you might want to make, hmm, donate to one of the organizations that I am involved with, C4SS, Individual Sovereign University, or two of them that I think are really in the ballpark of agorism. So please do that. Thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Oh, and I'm going over to the other channel now, which I believe I'm under Peaceful Evolution. Yeah, Peaceful Evolution. So I'll be there.